Welcome to the Reborn Outdoors Podcast. This is going to be episode 1.
Yep.
We are getting a fresh start on this thing, got some new equipment, and we are excited to tackle this idea. This is Mike Young, and I also have Justin Jarrett here with me. And we are going to just talk about the outdoors and hunting and fishing and hiking and family and life and the Bible and Jesus and whatever other things come up, I guess.
Tack them on there at the end.
Yeah. Very end of the list there. Anyways, this idea was kind of like just a passion project for us. I think a couple of us we'd gotten together at a bow shoot last season.
Yep.
And just kind of talked about like wanting to do something different and try to fill a void that we felt like was in the outdoor media industry right now, and kind of do a crossover with our faith as well as kind of our experiences outdoors and in relationship with each other and with those that we go hunting and fishing and, all of those things with. We felt like we kind of wanted to tell some stories and kind of bring conversation around the outdoor world and how our walk with Jesus kind of plays into some of those things and in our relationships with each other. So that's kind of the 5-second rundown of where we're going and why we're here and all of that.
That's good enough. Let's get going.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to talk about talk a little bit about our hunting experiences in this episode, and we're going to recap this past deer season. So We are a couple months removed now from deer season. We are in the state of Georgia, and that's as far as we'll go with that.
Sure. So personally for me, I've been hunting for about 5 years now, and I got into it. Group of men from my church were like, this is what you got to do. I grew up fishing and doing these things, but I didn't really have a dad or anybody to teach me how to hunt, what to do, where to go, all the rules, everything like that. And so it was later on in life, these guys got me involved with it. We went up and I shot like a spike buck, and it was the greatest thing ever, And then the next year, my old senior pastor, he had a bow that he was just getting rid of, probably an early, a 20-year-old Matthew solo cam that he was just tossing. And I was like, no, let me have that,
Oh yeah.
Put a new string on it, put a, $20 trophy ridge sight on it, got whatever arrows I was told to buy, and cut myself on the broadheads the first time I pulled them out of the package, some Grim Reapers, and
there you go.
It all started with a doe that came within 4 yards of my ground blind at last light. And there's no reason I should have hit it because I couldn't see my peep. I just basically used the circle of the sight to gauge in, and it was so close, and it ran 80 yards and died, and I was hooked. From then on, I was like, I want to shoot bows. I want to bow hunt. I want to hunt. Yes, of course. My wife got on board. She wanted to eat deer meat. And so that is the main goal basically every fall is get my freezer stocked, potentially some family members' freezer stocked. And even our church has a food pantry, and we can donate the processed meat to that as well. So it's who wants to eat, and that's my big motivation with hunting. I love the outdoors, the alone time, the quiet, where I can be with God, where I can grow young men into it as well, and teach them how to hunt and shoot and get to experience all the creation that God has for us. And so that's my history and what I really enjoy with it.
Yeah, for sure. I think mine is honestly pretty similar to yours. I mean, my wife grew up out in the country, and I'm kind of more of a city slicker type of guy, have been historically, and I'm trying to wear every bit of that off of me now. So we are, full head first into the hunting and fishing world, and I didn't start until I was like 22, 23, and didn't really have like any kind of family that's ever hunted or, anything like that. And my wife's family is very much like familiar with kind of that country lifestyle, I would say, and the, living off of deer meat and, things that you raise yourself and animals that you raise and vegetables and things like that. And so there definitely has been a lot of help that's come from us being near her family and kind of the relationships with a couple of those older guys that I've been able to kind of learn a few things and hunt with them and kind of get going. And a couple of real close friends of mine grew up hunting, and so it's been in a whole nother level to that relationship to like have them teaching me things about how to hunt and like what you're looking for deer sign and what kind of terrain and habitat and things like that. Like all of those things. It's been a major learning process for sure, but also been like a really good time with those guys and really building relationships that I probably would not have really had otherwise. So I've been hunting the last 2 full seasons and then about a half of a season the first year. So kind of jumped in with rifle hunting. Georgia has a super insanely long rifle season. So and it was a little bit easier barrier of entry that first year to do that. And so I kind of did that, hunted some family land, and then kind of what I'd say is my first full season, I went ahead and picked up the bow and kind of started down that rabbit hole. And now I would say that combined, we probably all shoot a lot more archery stuff than we do rifle stuff, whether that's hunting or just targets in 3D and stuff like that. But still take full advantage of that long Georgia rifle season for sure, for me anyways. And I'm primarily hunting public land now. I have a couple of like real small family pieces of land that we do a little bit of hunting on, but not a whole lot. So primarily public land, trying to same thing, fill the freezer. That's kind of the primary goal. We're working towards a more self-sustained lifestyle and trying to, know a lot more about where our food comes from and be a lot more conscious of the things that we're putting into our bodies and consuming. And I think deer meat is like the number one way to have good control over that.
It's the
Super
good
helpful.
entry level, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can use it for anything.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, burgers to tacos, spaghetti to hamburger help, like whatever, you can find a use for it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I made a smoked backstrap, total tangent here, but I did a bacon wrapped. I took a backstrap and filleted it out flat.
Yeah.
And filled it with like a jalapeno cream cheese and then rolled it like a cinnamon roll and wrapped it in bacon. Threw that bad boy on the smoker for like 4 or 5 hours. Oh my gosh. That was the best meal I've ever had, like by far.
There's no limits with it.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
it's like a scaled down version of an entire cow.
It is.
Essentially.
So, and I mean, you can play with it to where you're doing roasts, you're doing pulled pork, you're doing, you can have barbecue, you can have all kinds of things with it. It's just you're only limited by how willing you are to look up recipes and your own abilities and things like that. Like it's really not tough to make a wonderful meal out of deer.
That was my biggest hurdle. I'd never had deer meat, and then obviously my wife's family had some one time, and I was never had it, so I tried it, and they had it like country fried steak style. That's how they eat it the most. And I was like, this doesn't taste different than beef.
Yeah.
I was like, this may as well be a steak. And that kind of opened my eyes to, I had no idea. Everybody talks about deer meat has this weird gamey taste and this whatever, and it's like, no, I've never even experienced that. I don't even know what you're talking about.
No, it all depends on how long it was on the ground.
Oh yeah.
How'd you handle it? Did you take it to a processor? Did you do it yourself? Did you do a bad job yourself? Did they do a bad job? It just all depends on, because, beef would have the same if I went out here, put an arrow through a cow's heart, and then had to cut it up myself and take it home
That's
and
true.
do it. Because, they hang that meat to where all the blood comes out of it, and then they allow it to dry age in the coolers. That's hanging meat. Any movie, anything you've ever seen in a slaughterhouse, some mob movie or whatever, all the meat's hanging there. And it's allowing it to not develop that taste or bacteria and all these things. And, most guys, they cut up their deer, they throw it in a cooler on ice. It's soaking in all that water and this, and it could leave it, most of the time it could turn out fine. But if you don't handle it well, you don't keep it to temp, it's going to get weird. So
Yeah.
anyone who has ever been served bad deer meat, I'm not going to blame the guy, because that was probably like your papaw or somebody who cut it up. But like that's their fault. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's not the meat's fault by any means.
No. So
No. Well, let's talk about, speaking of kind of our hunting experiences, let's kind of circle back. We're now like a couple months removed from deer season.
yes.
So we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of encounters that we may have had this year. I know that I hunted out of state for the first time.
Okay.
So that was fun. Also horrible, but fun.
Yeah.
So why don't you kick us off?
I'll kick us
First
off
story.
with one. So this year, I would almost describe it, this past hunting season, it was my Daniel Boone season. I've been listening to audiobooks on Daniel Boone. I've been reading some. There's one, Meat Eater just put out one. The Bear Grease podcast has their whole thing on Daniel Boone. There's a book I read called like Blood and Treasure and something else. Like there's a lot of resources out there about Boone, and my whole interest in him got sparked through. I was driving back home from Kentucky. One of my church members has a place up there. We hunt, we do retreats, all kinds of things up there. And we were driving back through, and I made a wrong turn, and now we're in the middle of the Daniel Boone National Forest. And I was like, I've heard about him my whole life. I know a lot about Davy Crockett. I know a lot about this and that. And so I started doing my research and listening to audiobooks and stuff, and just fascinated with the whole aspect of, he was probably the first white guy to be in a certain part of the country completely undeveloped, other than where there was Native American settlements and this and that, just completely undeveloped. And so you go over a ridge, there's nothing. There's just woods. You go over another, there's nothing. Just more woods and fields and this. And that was when bison were still in the Cumberland Gap.
Okay.
Elk were still, well, they are now, but before they had to be reintroduced because we
Right.
killed them all off. I mean, hundreds of turkeys in flocks and deer everywhere, and just abundant game, no restrictions, no borders or boundary lines, and just there. Just a guy and a gun and some powder and, an axe, because he could like cut down and build a cabin with a day. So anyways, I call it my Daniel Boone year because I did pretty much the entirety of my hunting was from the ground. And I had some issues with my bow and that stuff. And so I relied more heavily on a gun this year than I ever have before. Because it got to the point in the season where it was like, I need to start laying some meat down. So it was my Daniel Boone year in the sense that, like, I was hunting from the ground. I was not still hunting. I was moving. And most of the time I was hunting was typically in the rain or right after a rain.
Okay.
So that my scent was down, the noise from me walking was eliminated basically.
Yeah.
Because gun season doesn't start till all the leaves are down for
Right.
the most part. And I was able to get, let's see, I killed 2 does within just a few minutes of each other with a gun from about 10 yards.
Nice.
I snuck up on them. I was on a ridge, and they were bedded down off to the side of the ridge.
Yeah.
It poured rain, and so I was able to like creep right up in on them. And I shot one, turned and saw that the other one was just standing there looking at me.
They do that sometimes.
They do that sometimes. So
You never know. When you have a group of does come in like that, after you take one shot with the rifle, it's like you may have 5 minutes to take another shot.
Yeah.
Or they may be just gone in 10 seconds. So, there's usually no in between.
No. So I took that second one. Boom, there it goes. Those were my first 2 kills of the season. And that didn't happen until November. So that's why the pressure was kind of on to make that happen. And then a buck I took this year, that was on private land in Kentucky, those does. The buck I took this year was on public land. And again, I was creeping down National Forest Trail, and I hear footsteps to my right, and I see there's a buck nose down walking parallel with me, basically, just 10 yards off from me. Didn't see me, didn't notice me. I'm like, okay. So I pull up, my gun goes click. I've been having issues with this gun where it wasn't chamber. I don't know. I was messing up probably. Again. Yeah. Anyways. So I'd had a dud at one point, cost me $1 in the season. This time I think I literally just forgot to chamber around. I don't know, which I'm habitual in, like, when I get out of the truck, I chamber around, I do all my noise making right after I get out of the truck and then go in. Didn't happen. Gun goes click. I rechamber. He's still moving and he's gone. So he kind of goes down the hill. I'm still on this road in the National Forest, and they kind of start splitting off. And I was like, I got to try something. I can't see him. I can still hear him. He's close. And so I just try to bleat. So I do the doe call with my mouth, and long story short, he pops up on the side of that road. Like, he pops up over the ridge, not 8 yards in front of me, blows. I've got my gun down still. Blows, runs just kind of to this next ridge, maybe 40 yards. Shoot, dropped him. But it was intense. And I'll finish out that story by saying, so I say dropped him. I hit him. He ran maybe 20 yards, went down. Okay. So I follow along the road. I put my bag and stuff down, and I start heading towards him. He died literally under some other guy's trail cam.
Nice.
And it was a cell cam. And we were on public forest, and I was like, great, like, whose could this be? Yeah. And then I look, and not 15 yards away from that, there's a tripod, like a big tripod tower that somebody has left there in the middle of National Forest, right?
Yeah, you don't see that much around here.
I know. So I was like, okay. Like, the camera I thought was odd, and I think it's funny because
I've never seen a camera. One time I've seen a camera in the woods, but I knew generally whose it was, and I knew generally where they were hunting at.
No, I mean, dead at the bottom of the tree, there's the camera. I'm smiling at it like an idiot because I think it's so funny.
I would love to get those pictures. If you happen to run across this podcast.
Well, no. Here's what happened.
Oh, gosh.
So the guy came.
Okay.
He got the picture of me standing there grinning like an idiot over my dead deer. He lived not 400 yards down the mountain. That's why he's got a tripod up there, because it's basically his backyard.
Gotcha.
It's not. It's public.
Right.
But he's got stands all over that mountain because him and his son hunt there. Okay, now I see why. So, I don't see him. He's coming up. I went back up to the road to my bag, got my kill kit, went down to the deer, and he comes walking up. And, everything in me from everything I've seen on YouTube or heard stories of, I was like, I just prepped myself like, this is going to be a bad encounter. Because, this was not a huge buck. Okay. Yeah. And this was right behind his house. And who knows what I was ready to get yelled at for shooting at his house or being on his land or I've hunted here. All the things that you're told happen on public land when you run into other hunters. This dude, he was like, congratulations. I've never seen this guy before, this buck. That's so awesome. Where did you walk in from? How can I, and all these things. He's like, you want to just drag it down to my house and then drive around to pick it up? I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. And we're figuring out where each other goes to church and doing all like super nice guy. As we're standing there talking over this buck, we hear something running in the woods. Now, he had brought his gun with him, and mine was back up by my bag. I just had my knife and stuff in my hand. And no lie, come hauling tail is a nice buck, a big buck. Not this little, like, 5-pointer who, if he hadn't been 10 yards from me and I hadn't, like a nice buck.
Yeah.
And so he drops to one knee. I drop down. I go, buck, buck, buck. Like I'm trained, instinctually trained to do. He pulls his gun up. It stops maybe 9-10 yards in front of us and just stares at us for a second. And he puts his gun down. And I was like, what is he doing? Like I would have shot that deer in a heartbeat and made the story even better. And before the deer even runs off, he goes, "Oh, not yet." I was like, "Not yet."
That's bold.
Not yet. He's like, "Oh, that buck likes to sleep around here. I've been letting him walk for 2 years."
Bold strategy.
And I was like, okay. And it was at that point in my mind, I was like, what does he not let walk?
Yeah.
Because that is a nice buck for around here.
Yeah.
I mean, like, no doubt I would have shot it. No question. And he just let him go. So I find out just the quality of bucks that guy, because he lets me drag this deer down to his house. I was like, "Can I gut it here?" And he was like, He's like, "I don't want coyotes." I was like, I respect that. Had every right to, but I'm playing nice with this guy because this is basically his backyard.
Yeah.
He hunts here. He's being super kind to me.
Oh, yeah.
So we head down to his house. My friend I was hunting with, he goes to get my truck, and he's going to meet us there. And while we're waiting, the guy takes me into his garage, and he starts showing me all the things he's killed on that mountain. And I was like, looking at those, I mean, just some of the nicest bucks I've ever seen in the area. And him and his son, like, pretty consistently kill just in their backyard, basically. And I was like, you have a sweet setup.
Oh, my gosh.
Between where your house is and you get to hunt this. And he's like, yeah, and honestly, I go a couple more miles in and this and that. And I was like, okay. So super kind, encouraging me. I told him, I was like, I almost feel bad if I come hunt back here. He's like, no, dude, that's what it's all there for. And I was like, yeah. And so pretty much probably spoiled me with an interaction with some other hunter on public land. Like, I doubt I'll ever have that kind of interaction again. But it was so good, and I'm just grateful for that guy. So,
oh, yeah. That's incredible.
So it was a good season. I took 5 deer overall and plenty of meat for the freezer.
Cool. Yeah, I had a lot of people encounters this year, a lot more public land, and also we went up and hunted Illinois this year.
Oh, yeah.
So that was a completely new experience for me, for sure. Yeah. Watching like 150-inch bucks like run across fields in the middle of the day is very unusual for me. So I know, right? So this was the first year that I'd hunted out of state, and we went up and hunted Illinois. So my brother-in-law has been up there a couple of years now, and he kind of had some spots picked out in public that he was like pretty interested in and had some good encounters in years past. So he asked me if I wanted to go, and so we went up there and spent about a little over a week up there, and all public land. We had hit or miss weather. We were in the middle of November, so we knew we were like pretty good on time frame. I think we were probably like leaving right around the start of the peak rut.
Okay.
So we were getting movement, but not crazy. Also like super highly pressured public. So
okay,
that was not helping either. We started in southern Illinois, and like the second day we had like a 75, 80 degree day, and we were like, it's not even really worth hunting.
Right. So
we bounced and drove a few hours more north, and kind of found a piece of property that there was a section that was residents only, and there was a section that was, non-residents, whatever. Anybody could hunt it. So we jumped on that piece of public that we were allowed to hunt, and it was a state park, which is kind of like, I've never hunted a state park. You can't really, that's like a special thing here in Georgia. You really got to get drawn for those or whatever. And so,
Right.
But this area is like known as like primo area of Illinois, apparently. And we had no idea until we got there. And then we get into town, and it's like everything is whitetail, like Whitetail Bank, Whitetail Properties, all these like everything, all the signs are like about big bucks.
This
and,
is the culture.
We were like, oh my, like this whole town exists because of hunting, basically. And it was like we pulled into a motel, the only motel we could find a room at. And you just look at every room has a truck in front of it. And you're talking 10 different states, license plates. Everybody's hunting the same county. And we had never heard of this place before. Like, go to looking it up, and it's like all the big name YouTubers have property there, and like all the farms and everything. Like,
so you just stumbled into it, basically.
Had no idea. And it's like primo, top of the line, best of the best of Illinois, apparently. So we get all excited. We're like, heck yeah, dude, this is going to go down.
Yeah.
It's going to make it so much better. And we get out there, and it took us like 2 or 3 days to kind of get our feet wet, figure out this piece of property. And we literally hit every corner of the property. We hit a different corner every day because we were hunting for sign, and I wasn't really seeing what I thought I should be seeing for sign. And so every day I was like, should be in the peak rut.
Yeah.
Like, I want to be seeing sign before I'm going to really set up somewhere. So it did a ton of walking. And we ended up like kind of finding whatever parking area we were allowed to park in, and kind of like walking straight towards property lines, and just kind of like walking property lines to see if maybe the deer were traveling in and out of certain areas to get onto the private or whatever. And so we kind of did that for a couple of days and really didn't have a ton of success. And it gets down to, we were there until like Monday was dead latest that we could leave. We really were trying to leave Saturday or Sunday. And we get down to like Friday, and it's like, all right, it's time to figure something out here. Like, we do not have a whole lot of time left. And so we had picked a completely new part of the property that we hadn't been in yet. We're like, we're just going to bomb in here, go in at like 11 o'clock to get set up for the afternoon. Like, we're going to get 2-3 hours hiking in, cover as much ground as we can, or whatever we got to do. So we both split off and get our own, kind of go in separate directions. And my brother-in-law found some decent sign. I mean, I don't think it was like anything super great, but it was like enough to where it's like, all right, now we're getting into time, need to get set up. I'm way back here. We're just going to go ahead and sit it, know? And so he got set up. I'm walking. I'm like, oh, there's a tree stand. Okay, cool. So I'm like, I'm going to keep going. Kind of walk 50 more yards, and I jump a doe out of her bed, whatever. It's like, okay, get in the field, go 50 more yards, another doe.
Another doe.
50 more yards. It's like another doe. So it's just like, they have these old clear cuts.
Yeah.
So we don't really have a lot of clear cuts in this area, and I've never had experience hunting that stuff, but it's not clear. Yeah. It's like 10 foot tall grass and brush and all kinds of stuff, and they have like a little bit of a path mode around it. And so I had no idea, so I'm just like booking down this path because it's flat, and I'm like, I can walk fast. So I'm booking it, and I'm jumping deer all over the place. And so I'm like, dang it, like, I have got to figure out I've got to find somewhere to set up here because there's deer everywhere. I just need to get still and relax a little bit. So So I like get back into an actual food plot field that they had planted. And I'm like, I don't know, it's like 3:00 or something. I'm like, it's time for sure to be set up. And so it's like, I'm going to cut cross country across this field. So I start halfway across the field, and some dude like leans out on the ground and like waves at me. And so I'm like, all right, there's a dude there. So I'm going to go back to where I just jumped all these deer from. I'm like, this is the last. I was so ready to be done. I was like, I'm ready to go home. There's people everywhere. I can't hunt here. Like, this is driving me nuts. And eventually, another half hour of walking later, I was like halfway back to the truck, and I was like, I'm just going to go sit in the truck. I found another ladder stand. It's like my second or third one for that day. And I was like, the wind's blowing good off of this clear cut right at this ladder stand. And earlier in the week, I had seen a monster buck, like probably 90 yards across like a thicket area, right along a creek bank. So he was downwind of the thicket and running the edge into kind of nose into the wind. Mm-hmm. And I'd never really seen a buck do that before. Like, I've heard people talk about that, like that's what bucks do. And I never really experienced it until then. And I'm like watching this giant run in front of me, and I can't do anything because, it's archery only and whatever. And so I was like, that moment comes back in my mind. I was like, I'll just sit up here. So I literally set up not even 5 feet from this dude's stand. I was like, he's not in it. I don't care.
Something's got to give.
I was like, it's 4:30 at this point. I'm like, I don't have time to deal with this. So I just got up. I sat. I got down like 10 minutes before light. Like, I was like, I don't care.
You're just done.
I was done. I have no service back in there too. So I get out to where I've got service again. And I'm like most of the way back to the truck. Probably, it was over 2 miles that day.
Yeah.
And I'm like most of the way back to the truck, and my phone starts ringing. And my brother-in-law, he goes, so we got one down. It's like, all right, because I was done. I was toast. I'm like, I'm going to this truck. If he shoots something, I'm going to be so mad. And sure enough, that was the one time he saw something. And he killed, monster, not monster antler size, sure, but like having never hunted a Midwest state, I didn't realize the deer are like 300 pounds.
Big.
And he just got his mount back, and the skull is like twice the size of a Georgia deer that he's killed. Put them side by side, and it's like one looks like a child. It's insane.
Dude, they're just
the
beefy.
Difference.
Yes.
We walked up to that thing. It smelled like a barn animal. You could smell hay on it. Like, it was unlike anything I've ever experienced. It smelled like you walked into like a goat barn somewhere, and you could tell that thing's been living on private and like just cruise over to the public every once in a while and go back and get in the food plots and whatever. And he'd gotten beat up pretty good, so he had a broke off main beam on one side. So we think like probably he had gotten beat up too bad and then got kicked over back onto the public and kind of like bumped off of the private. So I'd love to see what kicked his butt. Yeah. It's a nice deer. So, but yeah, so we found he managed to find the only terrain in all of Illinois that was steep, and he killed one at the bottom of it. So we had to like drag this thing up and out, and Illinois is real particular about their tag system and all of that. And so we had to drag it to where we could have service to call it in and, do that whole thing. So I did not kill anything in Illinois. We hunted a couple more days, and I got to full draw on a pretty decent, like, it was probably a 2 or 3 year old buck. Like,
sure,
out of state last day for sure was going to go down, but I needed him to take 2 steps. And he saw me pull back, and then like as soon as I was getting settled in, he was gone. So had a lot of good like big buck encounters. Had a spike broadside at 15 yards, but decided no, we're in Illinois. I'm not going to do that.
No. The biggest buck I've ever had in front of me, alive, within shooting light, was right behind my house. Now, there's like 30 acres behind where I live that I have permission on, so I can hunt all I want, do whatever. I'd come home. This was around lunchtime. It was like 11 o'clock on a weekday. I was not planning to hunt. There he is. There he is. How far is he? About 40 yards from my back porch. Okay. Let me go. Let me creep in here. Let me get my bow. Let me walk as silently as I can on my gravel driveway, and let me try to get in position around the fence that keeps my dogs in so that I have an angle on him broadside. It's perfect. His head's behind a tree. It's that one I sent you a picture of today.
Okay.
His head's behind a tree.
This is a really nice buck.
It is a really nice buck.
For sure.
His head's behind a tree. He's broadside. Range him 50 yards. I've killed several does at 40. I'm a pretty good archer. I was like, I'm going to drill this thing. I'm going to drill this thing. So I was like, well, let me look. I draw back, and I'm holding, and I'm looking, and I'm like, I'm going to drill this thing. As I'm going to press my thumb release, like I've got my whole shot sequence in place. My bubble's good. My hand's loose. Like I'm sending an arrow. It's in process. It hasn't taken off yet, but it's in process. There's another buck that's his running buddy. And I've got another picture from that same night where I sent you the picture of. They're fighting in front of my camera right before that. The other buck sees me. He's like 20, 30 yards up the hill. I never saw him until he blew. He blows it. Which, okay. But I was like, it's too late now. But as the arrow is beginning to go, I've committed. That buck, he picks his head up. And so now his head's not down behind a tree. It's up, and he's alert, and he's looking my direction. And as my arrow flies, he perfectly turns out of the way. And it was going right to the punch. He U-turns it as my arrow flies through, and I've got lighted nocks. So it was the most slow-mo scenario I've ever seen. And he just perfectly misses, and he runs off. And I had no words. And I was, it's one of those scenarios where maybe if I was 10 yards back, could I have made the shot? Maybe. But would he have reacted as much to the noise? Maybe not. If I was 10 yards forward, he might not have had time to get out of the way.
Yeah.
And so it was just this perfect scenario. And I was like, well, that's hunting at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday or whatever. But never had him in range again. He was at 60 yards, but no shot. Opening day, saw him several more times. The last time I saw him, Christmas Day, he had been broken off.
Dang.
And I was like, you're too pretty. That was when I was torn so hard between me and myself being a meat eater, and that's why I hunt, and the conflict of but the horns are still cool. You know what I mean? And it's you want that deer at its best when you take it. Yeah. And he had already been whooped. He was not at his best, so I did not shoot him this year. So hopefully next. Hey guys, so we got recording on our first episode. We were going to share with y'all, stories from last season. And then they just kept coming. And then they just kept, because there's so much, you've got, several months of all these different days and hours and experiences with different guys. And anytime I go in the woods, it's an adventure, and there's always something cool to talk about. So we ended up talking for way too long. We're going to split that episode up into two. And so we're going to be continuing some more stories, some of which you heard last time, and we'll just keep going from there. So we hope you guys enjoy it.
I think that's going to wrap us up for episode 1. So this is the Reborn Outdoors Podcast.
Yes, sir.
We're going to wrap it up, and we will catch you guys in the next one.
Thank y'all.